AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Hey listeners, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts. This humble show is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, yours truly included, and all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts, the Holocaust produced unimaginable tragedy, but also moments of extraordinary moral courage. Moments when ordinary people chose to do what was right and not what was safe. Among these heroes stands Chiune Sugihara, a Japanese diplomat stationed in Lithuania during the Second World War. At enormous personal risk, he issued thousands of transit visas to Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi persecution. His small act of defiance saved thousands of lives and earned him a place among history's great rescuers, alongside names like Raoul Wallenberg and Oskar Schindler. But who was this man, and how did a Japanese official working for an ally of Nazi Germany become a beacon of humanity in Europe's darkest hour? Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Chiune Sugihara was born on New Year's Day in 1900 in a quiet village in Japan. He grew up in a modest home but showed an early gift for learning. Bright, diligent, and curious, he attended Waseda University in Tokyo, where he studied English and developed a fascination with foreign cultures. After graduation, he joined Japan's foreign ministry and quickly stood out for his linguistic talent, especially his command of Russian. That skill took him to Harbin, Manchuria, a tense crossroads of Japanese expansion and Russian influence. There, Sugihara witnessed the moral gray zones of empire firsthand. Unlike many of his peers, he wasn't content to just follow orders blindly. When Japan's administration in Manchuria began abusing local Chinese residents, Sugihara did something almost unheard of for a government official. He simply resigned in protest. It was an act that revealed both his conscience and his independence, at a time when it was not something that Japanese officials did. Still, his expertise in Russian affairs made him too valuable. By the late 1930s, Sugihara was serving as vice consul in Kaunas, Lithuania, a small quiet posting that would soon place him at the center of a global crisis. By the summer of 1940, Kaunas was no longer quiet. After the German invasion of Poland in 1939, thousands of Polish Jews fled east into Lithuania, desperate to escape the Nazi regime. For a brief time, Lithuania remained a fragile refuge. But then in June 1940, the Soviet Union occupied the country, sealing its borders and leaving refugees trapped between two totalitarian powers: Hitler's Germany to the west and Stalin's USSR to the east, none too friendly to the Jewish population. Kaunas became a city of desperation. Synagogues overflowed with displaced families. Schools and basements turned into makeshift shelters. Every refugee was searching for the same thing: a way out. To escape, they needed transit visas, documents that would allow them to cross the Soviet Union and reach safety abroad. Some turned to the Dutch consul, who began issuing papers claiming refugees could travel to the island of Curaçao, no visa required, but those documents were useless without transit approval from another country. And that's when they came to Sugihara. In July of 1940, a delegation of Jewish refugees, rabbis, community leaders, and families appeared at the Japanese consulate. They asked for transit visas through Japan, which would let them travel by train across the Soviet Union, enter Japan, and then continue to destinations like Shanghai or even Palestine. For Sugihara, it was quite a dilemma. Japan by this point aligned with Nazi Germany. Official policy was clear. Visas could only be issued to travelers with proper documentation and enough money to support themselves. The refugees obviously had neither. Sugihara did what a good diplomat was supposed to do. He contacted Tokyo for instructions. The reply came back quite blunt. Do not issue visas. End quote. That night, he sat down with his wife, Yukiko. They talked for hours as to what would happen if he disobeyed. Would it end his career, endanger his family, or perhaps even worse? Yukiko later recalled that he barely slept for days, pacing the floor in silence. Finally, he made his decision. He would issue the visas anyway. People are in danger, he told his wife, and if I don't help them, I will regret it for the rest of my life. For the next month and a half, the consulate in Kaunas became a lifeline. Sugihara sat at his desk from dawn until nightfall, handwriting visas. Hundreds a day, to be precise. His hand cramped, his eyes blurred, but he kept writing. Each one bore his signature and the official red stamp of the Japanese Empire. These were not just bureaucratic documents. These were essentially passports to life. Every morning, long lines of refugees formed outside the consulate. Parents clutched their children. Rabbis prayed quietly. Some wept openly when their names were finally called. Sugihara greeted them kindly, often reassuring them in Yiddish or Russian that they would be safe. Between July and early September of 1940, he issued more than 2,000 transit visas, covering nearly 6,000 individuals when families were included. Many of them boarded trains on the Trans-Siberian Railway, crossed the vastness of the Soviet Union, and arrived safely in Japan, exhausted but alive. From there, they scattered to Shanghai, the United States, Canada, or as I mentioned, Palestine. Years later, survivors would say that Sugihara's signature saved their entire lineage, thousands of descendants alive today because of those ink-stamped papers. When the Soviets ordered the closure of foreign consulates, Sugihara still refused to stop. On the morning of his departure, as his own train pulled away from Kaunas, he kept writing visas, passing them through the window to the desperate hands reaching up from the platform below. Witnesses remembered him scribbling until the last possible second, his handwriting barely legible by then, and his face calm but resolute. This was the last act of the Japanese consul in Kaunas, a man who had chosen conscience over compliance. Sugihara's defiance did not go unnoticed. When he was reassigned, his colleagues whispered about his actions. And after the war, he was quietly dismissed from the foreign ministry. Officials claimed it was due to downsizing, but Sugihara himself suspected it was punishment for his disobedience. He never complained publicly. He simply went on with life, modestly, quietly. He worked odd jobs, later joining the trading company in Moscow. And unlike some other rescuers, he didn't seek attention or praise. For decades, his story was known only among those he had saved. While his career ended in obscurity, his legacy was quietly growing, half a world away. The refugees who carried those handwritten visas became known as Sugihara survivors. Many eventually settled in Israel, forming vibrant communities that would later trace their very existence back to one man, a Japanese diplomat who ignored his orders. Their gratitude endured across generations. In survivor testimonies, they spoke of his gentleness, his humility, and the way that he treated them not as statistics but as human beings. He looked at us, one survivor recalled, as though he saw our souls. It wasn't until the 1980s that Sugihara's story began to reach the wider world. Journalists and historians began piecing together the accounts. When the Israeli Holocaust Memorial learned of his deeds, they invited him to Jerusalem. In 1985, Chiune Sugihara was named Righteous Among the Nations, the first Japanese citizen ever to receive the honor. By then, he was frail and in very poor health, but he traveled to Israel nonetheless to accept the recognition in person. There, surrounded by families who owed their lives to him, he wept quietly. A year later, he passed away in Japan, but tens of thousands of people, the children and grandchildren of those he had rescued, still carry his name in gratitude. Sugihara's story stands out not only for his courage, but also for its context. Japan, though an ally of Nazi Germany, did not share Hitler's obsession with racial ideology. Anti-Semitic propaganda existed in Japan, don't get me wrong, but often imported from Europe. It never became government policy. Instead, Japan's attitude toward Jewish refugees was ambivalent, opportunistic, sometimes indifferent. In Shanghai, thousands of Jewish refugees found refuge in a Japan-controlled zone during the war, often spared from Nazi deportation efforts. Against this backdrop, Sugihara's decision was very personal, not political at all. He wasn't following orders, he was actually breaking them. He was a career diplomat, serving a militarized empire, yet his moral compass pointed firmly toward humanity. Now, none of this is to say that Japan did not have its own issues with prejudice, specifically against the Chinese, but that's a story for another day. Today, Sugihara's name is taught in schools across Japan and honored in museums around the world. His former consulate in Kaunas is now a museum, a quiet house filled with visas, photographs, and stories of those he saved. In Japan, streets, schools, and parks bear his name. And in Israel, he is remembered every year by the families who call themselves, as I mentioned, Sugihara generation. But perhaps the most powerful tribute comes not from the plaques or memorials, but from the words that he once spoke to his own son. Do what is right because it is right, and leave it to history to judge. If today's episode inspired you in any way, you can find sources, links, and upcoming guest announcements at www.historyshortspodcast.com or follow History Shorts Podcast on Facebook and X. Stay curious, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.